So I wanted to continue today a little bit in a related topic, and this might be a repeat because I did this several months back, but I think it's important, and some recent events have illustrated why it is important. So remember last week we did the context of the conversation about um, evaluating offers and the lessons that we can learn from looking at multiple offers that are received on a property. Okay. Um, the irony of it is the offer that we accepted that was in the context of our last meeting. Which I tell you what, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. Okay, is everybody looking at the spreadsheet? You remember this? Last week we had accepted this offer, offer number 3. That was for 245, was cash, was a ribbon home. Literally the afternoon after you and we talked about this and we reviewed this entire spreadsheet and evaluated this offer and had moved forward with this, I got a call that the inspection came back and the buyer is backing out of this deal. Just like that. All right. There was no rescuing it. It was due diligence. You're good. They were, they were more than happy they were not really willing to move forward. And to be honest with you, with this situation with Ribbon Home, Ribbon had some criteria in terms of repairs that needed to be done that were probably beyond the scope of what the seller was going to be willing to do anyway. Okay. So that is one of the disadvantages of Ribbon is they do have some criteria with regards to repairs, and that those repairs they have less flexibility than the average Joe does. Okay, so no big deal, but the illustration here is why you want to have backup offers. Okay, so fortunately, we had another offer that was in the wings. And while I was, so literally when you're in the listing agent position and you have multiple offers, once you get the first one under contract, you should immediately begin working on obtaining your backup offer. So that is exactly what I had started the process to do. Never got it formalized because there was not enough time. But had I had it formalized, offer number 4 would have been the backup that we would have chosen, which was the exact same sales price. It was, however, a conventional versus a cash transaction, but it was still very reasonable. They had very reasonable 3 days of due diligence, 14 and 16 days there. The only problem with this one is you remember in our illustration we had talked about they wanted to close on the 21st, and that 16 days of due diligence would have put it pretty close to the closing date. So when I went back to this particular agent and said, hey, is your buyer still interested? Have they found anything yet? She said, no. I said, all right, well, here's what's happened. We've got an opportunity. Are they interested? Are they still interested in moving forward? She called me back in an hour and said, yes. Okay, so we did obtain then a new offer. She initially said, well, we'll just change the expiration date on the old offer and move forward with it. But now we're like 3 days later, and the closing date would have been aggressive for the lender. So she actually gave me a new offer. So if you notice in the spreadsheet, here's what we did. We expanded this out, and now this counter offer number 4 was basically their revised offer. Still the same price. They did change the closing date. They did change the due diligence period from 3 days to 4 days, and they did 9 and 14 days on the financing and the appraisal contingency. Everything else was exactly the same. Okay, so we actually did get a no kidding. We never got a formal backup offer, but for all intents and purposes, this was a backup offer. And within an hour of being notified that we were being terminated during due diligence, we were back under contract. Okay. So let's talk about how that process formally looks. Let me put a formal backup offer up on the screen. Okay, everybody looking at PowerPoint on the backup offer? So let's talk about the formal backup offer process. All right. So a formal backup is basically there are many pros. There are very few cons. So I would strongly encourage you, if you do not win in the bidding war, that you submit a formal backup offer to whoever you just submitted your primary offer to. Okay. If you are a listing agent, after you've accepted the first offer, the very next thing you should be doing is start to work on the backup offer. Okay. Why do we submit a backup offer? According to the National Association of Real Estate, 74% of all contracts that are written make it to the closing table. So in other words, 26% do not make it to the closing table. You have a better than 1 in 4 chance that the backup offer could come into play. Those are fantastic odds. So absolutely fantastic odds. And when you do a formal backup offer, if you're working with a client that has not done a buyer's brokerage agreement with you, when you submit a backup offer, that gives you an opportunity to solidify your agreement with them. So that is one of the advantages of doing a backup offer. You earn credibility with your buyer. It shows your dedication and commitment to service to your client. A backup offer helps your co-op listing agent. If they have backup offers, they are more inclined to do to be resistant to an unreasonable request for repairs. And just frankly, backup offer, it's the right thing to do for your client. Okay. Any questions on anything so far?
I got it right here.
Go ahead, Julia.
Okay, I have a question. Can your client, if you're the buyer, can your client still go out and look at houses and pull back from the backup offer?
Say that one more time. I had my volume set really low.
If you're the actual buyer, can your client still go out and look at houses?
Absolutely. They can still go out and look at other houses. They can still make an offer on another house. There is no downside. They still don't have to do, if you've written the backup offer the correct way, they don't have to obligate earnest money yet. They don't have to do inspections yet. All that comes into play later, and we're going to talk about exactly how that process works. So your client can still continue to shop, and then basically that keeps this one in their hip pocket. So that's your script with them is there's great opportunity. There's so many pros and basically no cons to doing a backup offer. I can tell you my script with my buyer clients is I strongly encourage backup offers, especially in this market. I can tell you right now of at least half a dozen of my clients in the last 2 years that are sitting in their brand new houses today because we took the time and effort to do a backup offer, including my mother and father are now living in a home in Ball Ground, Georgia, because we did a backup offer on that house and the primary fell through and we became the primary. Okay, so it is absolutely makes them so much sense to do a backup offer. All right. So what is a backup offer? When it's used after losing in a multiple offer situation, when submitting an offer late or the seller already accepted another offer, you can submit the backup offer at that point too. A backup offer puts your buyer first in line. It basically gives them the primary right of refusal. It gives your client the first right of refusal. Basically, if the seller signs your backup offer, then it is automatic that it's going to be your client that will win the backup offer, or that will be the next to go under contract, because it obligates you to them to you at that point. A backup offer is a fully executed, signed by all parties purchase and sale agreement with all of the associated exhibits, everything that you would do in a primary offer, plus one additional form, which is the GAR F604 backup agreement contingency exhibit. Okay, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit more detail here in just a second. So it's everything that you would normally do for an offer, a purchase and sale agreement, the financing, the seller's property, community association, plus you do this backup contingency agreement exhibit. Okay, any questions on that? What a backup offer is not, it is not the top drawer of somebody's desk. It is not a verbal, we'll call you if everything crashes to the ground. You will most likely have to educate your co-op agent on the formalities of a backup offer. Okay, because a lot of them think a backup offer is, okay, I'm going to top this, I'm going to tuck your offer in the top drawer of my desk, and when the world comes crashing down, then I will call you. Okay, that is not a formal backup offer. All right, so you may have to educate them that a backup offer is a fully signed, negotiated. You can have, no kidding, counter offers on a backup offer. Okay, that's how formal it should be. Okay. The advantages of the backup offer: your buyer client can continue shopping for a new home. They have security that the home that they first fell in love with may still be in play, but it doesn't stop them from continuing the shopping trip. There's no earnest money due until the backup offer becomes the primary. There's no due diligence or inspections until after the backup becomes the primary. It gives the listing agent, I mentioned this before, the ability to negotiate from a stronger position. I have found that when a seller has a backup offer, a formal backup offer, the probability of the first offer crashing and burning actually goes up, if you can believe that. Because when they know that they've got a backup offer and somebody that is waiting in the wings, they're more inclined to say, nah, the seller's not going to agree to a long list of repairs. We have a strong backup offer in place. And quite often that means that the primary will terminate. Okay. I have actually experienced this firsthand and have been shocked at how many times a seller is more inclined to let the first offer terminate in order to take on the second offer, the backup offer. All right. So when you do the offer, you can literally use the exact same documents, the exact same primary offer, the purchase and sale. I would recommend a couple of changes and a couple of things to make sure that you are doing. Instead of having a closing date of whatever that date happens to be, you would simply change that to 30 days after the binding agreement date. Okay, so a backup offer is a fully negotiated, fully endorsed, signed, executed purchase and sale agreement with one thing that is missing: you do not enter a binding agreement date. Okay, the binding agreement date, there's a notification that comes later on that will start the clock for things like the earnest money and the closing date. Does that make sense? All right. So you would simply make this one change instead of an actual date, because you don't know the actual date. And if you're working with a lender, unless it's a cash transaction, you're probably going to need at least 30 days. So you make this one little change on the closing date. You make sure that your earnest money is due 3 days after the binding agreement date. And again, your due diligence period doesn't start until after that binding agreement date is entered. This is the how the backup offer is triggered is, or actually how the backup offer looks. You submit this document along with the other exhibits. You can add it to the end of your exhibit list. You're not going to know these two pieces of information unless the listing agent gives them to you. So you submit these blank, and what this is this this agreement is a backup or a secondary agreement to the primary agreement, which may be amended from time to time with the binding agreement date. This is the primary, which you don't know. The listing agent will know between the buyer and the seller and the first buyer. Okay, so you submit this part blank, but you do fill in the date down here below, and you would generally do this, approximately 30 days out. Theoretically, you want to keep this live right up until the closing date of the primary offer. Does that make sense? Okay. How it is triggered. You instruct the listing agent if and when the primary falls through. They provide a GAR notice indicating the primary has fallen through and the backup is now the primary, and the binding agreement starts upon this notice. The clock starts at that point on the earnest money, all contingencies, and the closing date. And there is a GAR document called a binding agreement date notification. And it's just a simple document that says the new binding agreement, delivery of notice of the binding agreement date is X. Okay. And this is the document that tells the world that your backup has now become a primary and that the new binding agreement date is the start of the clock for everything. Clear as mud. And then the previously signed offer plus the GAR notice constitute a complete offer package. At that point, that's when you would turn it into the help desk, the lender, closing attorney, and begin working on the contract as a normal transaction from that point forward. And then what happens if your buyer is during their backup contingency time frame, they find another home that they like better and they actually get an accepted offer? At that point, then you would do a notice to withdraw the offer, keep the backup offer in place while submitting and negotiating a new offer. When the new offer goes binding, immediately terminate the backup offer using the GAR notice to withdraw the offer. Okay. So in other words, if you never want to put your buyer in a position where they're under contract for 2 homes at the same time. So if you get a secondary, another offer accepted, immediately terminate your backup offer. I love this quote. Don't worry about failures, worry about the chances you missed when you didn't even try. What questions do you guys have? Yes, Miss Manuela.
So what in the rare case that you get a email saying that your offer is not a primary offer right about the same time that you decide that you don't want it?
That they don't want that house?
Yeah. What if my buyers decide that they don't want it and the email is already here saying your offer is not a primary offer? Do you have to accept it?
Okay, let me make sure I understand. So you've submitted an offer. They have not accepted your offer.
I'm sorry, it's a secondary offer. Like it's a
backup
off. Yes. And the initial offer has now fallen through and the listing agent is now emailing me saying your offer is not a primary offer right around the same time that my buyers have decided, you know what, we're going to pass on that.
So did your backup offer, did it get formally executed? Did your client sign anything?
I mean, just as a backup offer, it didn't become the binding primary yet.
It didn't become the binding? Then you can just send them a notice to withdraw the offer.
Okay. So
the GAR notice to withdraw.
Okay. So even though the secondary, the backup offer is in place, they don't have to accept it, period.
Correct.
Thank you.
And even if they did have it accepted, they still have a due diligence period, just like anything, and you can just send a termination and release. Depending upon where the signatures are in the process, you can still terminate it as a backup offer because you have a due diligence period.
And really, anything during the due diligence, if the wind flies in the wrong direction, you can still decide not to.
Yep. Remember, the due diligence period is the period in time in which your client can cancel for any reason at all or for no reason at all.
Okay.
They can have a nightmare that the house is haunted, wake up the next morning, send a TNR, And as long as it's within the due diligence period, they are absolutely within their right to say, I think your house is haunted. And there's not a darn thing that you or anybody else can do. Okay. That's a less elaborate example. I usually say that the house could be haunted by the ghost of my dead grandmother's cat, and they would still be within their right to terminate. Okay. All right, everybody. Yes. What other questions?
Real quick, so who actually starts the backup offer? Does the seller's agent say, hey, do you want to be our backup offer? Or do you contact the seller and say, hey, can we be your backup offer?
Both.
That's
Both.
what I wanted. That's okay.
If you are representing the buyer, then it's in your best interest to initiate that conversation with the listing agent. And again, you've just lost the bidding war with others. Okay, theoretically. So they may have gotten 5 other offers. Yours may have been number 2. Yours may have been number 5. So that generates a conversation with the listing agent. Hey, we are very interested. My buyers absolutely love this house. We're very interested in submitting a backup offer. If I were to submit a backup offer with the same terms as what we had in our primary, would we be close? What would you recommend we do to make my backup offer a viable offer that your seller would consider for a backup? And quite often they'll tell you exactly where you need to be. Well, you were okay on the sales price, but your earnest money was a lot lower than the one that they accepted. So that is a conversation to have. Now, if you are the listing agent, you should be going to number 2 and maybe even number 3. I would go in those orders sequentially, go to number 2 and say, hey, we would love for you to consider submitting a formal backup offer. And again, you are most likely going to have to educate that co-op agent on exactly what they need to do. You're going to have to tell them the GAR form to submit. You're going to have to walk them through the process. But if you do, your client is going to love you and you're going to expand your opportunities to do more business because you now have that backup offer in place. Okay. All right. There's some practical experience for you today. Tomorrow's huddle, we're actually doing some refresher reminder training because of some stuff that's happened recently on financing and appraisal contingencies, what they are not, how to navigate through that process, and some common mistakes that are being made. So stand by for that tomorrow at 11. All right. Y'all have a great day. Let me know if you need anything. I'm broker on call this week. So if you call the broker hotline, you're going to get me. All right. Have a great week, everybody.